happening?
I go meet Laura. We get in this little van. There's like three or four of us driving down to Robert Redford's. He has the Sundance Resort about 45 minutes away. And I'm talking to Laura in the van. I'm like, Laura, what do I call him? Do I call him Mr. Redford? Do I call him Rush? She's like, you call him Bob, Josh. I'm like, nope. That
I don't think I can do that.
there's just no way, no way. She's like, all right, whatever, weirdo. We all call him Bob. So like, you
He's
just
gonna know you don't fit.
you're just gonna have to work. You're gonna have to work it out.
This episode of Grounded in Maine is sponsored by ESG Review. ESG Review magazine is published quarterly in February, May, August, and November, and is available for free in print and digital formats. ESG Review is devoted to environmental, social, and governance strategies, technologies, and investments. ESGreview.net is updated every Wednesday with 8 new stories and is home to feature articles, news items, and more. Visit esgreview.net to stay informed and help us spark the collaboration and awareness needed to develop sustainable economies and communities around the world.
There's a place where there's no trouble, no more pain, no more struggle.
Grounded in Maine podcast is an open conversation about how we show up for the world. I started this podcast out of a desire to learn new ways to be sustainable because the word sustainability is big. It can be overwhelming, and I just wanted to learn, different ways to try to be part of the solution and not feel like it's too late. So I'm talking to people who are doing different things and learning so much. I hope you are too.
Hi there. Thank you so much for listening to Grounded in Maine today. My name is Amy Fagan. My guest today is Josh Dorfman, and I've been following Josh for a little bit, not too long, but so Josh, you are a podcast host of this SuperCool podcast, and you also are founder of Planted, which is a sustainable building material business. My words. And like you've been in the sustainability world for a long time. Not to date anything, but you were saying, at least 15 years you were doing, and then even before that, you were the lazy environmentalist. So I'm looking forward to learning more about you. And you're really active on on LinkedIn. Sorry. So I've been, following you there too, and just trying to learn as much about you as I can. So thank you so much for being on Grounded in Maine today. I am really looking forward to this.
Well, thank you so much, Amy. I am very pleased to have a chance to talk with you.
And like I was saying, following you on, podcast and LinkedIn, like a lot of the topics are sort of a little bit over my head, but I'm still very curious and I want to know. And I think that it's good for me to, to follow and try to figure it out. So, but you can also fill in some gaps, which is cool.
That all sounds fantastic. Happy to start wherever you'd like.
Yeah, so we're in April right now, and I was just listening to your podcast that came out this week about, oh my gosh, was it Rove? What was the
Rondo.
Rondo? And that's also
Yeah.
like no, it's not building materials because that was like bricks for like
Heat.
for heat. So cool. But so I wanted to just kind of bend your ear and hear, what cool things you're learning about and what cool things you're doing. So why don't we actually start with Planted, or the lazy environmentalists? Why don't you start at the beginning if you want?
Sure. Happy to hit both, but the through line for my career has been, once I started thinking about sustainability and how to act on sustainability, has been trying to come up with products and services that appeal to people, that are sustainable, right? But appeal to people whether they care about the environment or not. In other words, that are meet their needs, meet what they want out of a product, delight them, And then sustainability is like a bonus, right? And guess what? This table's made from recycled, you know, materials, or it's made from, reclaimed wood from the Steinway piano factory. And look how awesome it is. That was a brand we used to carry called Scrap Pile. And so, yeah, that's how I've thought about it. But I should say, just for some like context, my story starts in China in 1995. I went there after college. I was thinking about a career in diplomacy. I got a job teaching English on a university in a city called Nanjing, which at the time was a sleepy city of 5 million people. Now it's way less sleepy, I'm told. And I got a part-time job working in a bicycle lock factory for a company called Kryptonite. I don't know if you ever had a Kryptonite bike lock. They like invented these kind of sort of U-shaped lock. And I took the job because I just wanted to know as much about China as I possibly could, right? All the different facets of it. I ended up going to work for Kryptonite full time. And at the time, there were a billion people in China riding bicycles. Everywhere you look, people are on bikes. There were hardly any cars, maybe taxis.
Mhm.
And so, one, I started thinking, oh my God, I don't even really know anything about business, but I know there's a billion bicycles here. I know we have the best bike lock in the world. I'm gonna like retire in like 3 years. I'm gonna like cash out. And that did not happen for a whole host of reasons. But like important, I think, for this conversation, what I started realizing 2 years into this experience was that these billion bicycle riders actually all wanted cars. And you could see the tunnels and the highways and the bridge, everything that's become modern China, you could see that being built. And I thought, oh my God, I don't know anything about global warming, but there's gonna be a billion more cars here. I don't know
That's
what
a
that means,
problem.
right?
Yeah.
But I'm gonna do something about that. And that really changed my life. So I came back to the States, went to business school, thought about, different careers, went through the internet.com thing, but I could never shake this feeling of like, I have seen the future. It was shown to me. I've got to do something about that. And that's kind of what eventually led me to start my first company. But before I did that, I was in this like once I had that feeling of like, oh my God, like I see what's coming, I completely freaked out. I mean, I went into sort of like activist mode. I was protesting against I was like marching against the World Bank and the World Economic Forum while I was getting my MBA. And my friends were like, what is wrong with you? And I was like, dude, if you were only in my brain, you would like, I
You
can't even
saw
tell
what
you.
I
So
saw,
I
right?
am so confused right now. And but eventually what I came to feel was like I would come home for holidays and my brother, he'd be like, "Oh great, here he comes again to make us all feel guilty." And I thought like, "Oh geez, you know what? I'm not influencing anybody. I'm just like miserable myself. I'm making like the people I love miserable when they're around me. I have to find a better way." And that became my sort of point of view. Lazy Environmentalist was kind of like that as well. Lazy Environmentalist was like, and so that became a Sirius XM radio show and Sundance Channel TV show. It had an awesome run, but it started in my closet as a little tiny thing. So, I know what it's like to scrape and scrap and really love something and believe in something and really try and put in the effort. And sometimes it works out, sometimes, a little bit less so, but yeah, that's how
Oh,
I
oh, I love that. And that it totally you took my question, which is I was gonna try to squeeze it in, within everything, but like I love the that like tipping point where you're just like, oh, you know,
yeah.
this what we're doing is not working and how you got to the point where you got involved. So thank you for that. And that's I can only imagine how that must have felt. A billion cars the potential for that. Oh my goodness. But and I love that that you took so much action and and I totally had, people are like, "Oh my gosh, plastic wrap. I'm so sorry, Amy." I'm like, I'm stop. I'm not judging. Only if you're perfect can you do that. And even still you shouldn't because it's not nice. But yeah, I totally get that. And very cool. And so that you took action and you did something and then now you're building things and creating and um it's amazing.
So, well, thank you. I mean, leaping around a little bit. So yeah, but so lazy environment earlier in my career, I guess say 15 to 20 years ago, I was probably more, I know I was more focused on what can we as consumers do to shift toward more sustainable lifestyles, shift our consumption. And, you know, bought in is the wrong point of view, but I'm probably a little bit more bought out, I guess, of the concept of like, if we all do little things, they add up. I do agree with that, but I've just been hearing people say that for 20 years, and I actually haven't seen it add up to all that much.
Right.
So, and that's starting different kinds of companies. So 6 or 7 years ago, it was my second furniture company. I was in North Carolina and I was manufacturing furniture. North Carolina, historically, manufacturing capital of the world for furniture. And the pandemic hit, and I couldn't get the materials that I was wanting to use, which was this Forest Stewardship Council responsibly harvested plywood, beautiful material. When I could get it, quality was down, prices were up, and it just really started thinking a lot about materials and about, okay, this is responsibly harvested, but what does that really mean? I mean, we're still cutting down trees. Is that really the best we can do? So I was thinking a lot about materials. And in that moment, I was introduced to someone who had moved to North Carolina, who I didn't know much about, but someone introduced and said, hey, you should talk to this guy, Wada. Um, he has a manufacturing company. And so we get on the phone, and Wada's saying, oh man, Josh, you're going to build this sustainable furniture company. You're going to do all this good for the world. And I was like, I don't know. We're still cutting down trees. Not really so sure. And he's like, well, what would you do? I'm like, I'm more interested in materials. Like we had something that grew, faster than trees, something that was more sustainable, maybe hemp, maybe something else. And he was like, oh, well, I have 6 trash bags of hemp in my garage. And I was like, you what? Who are you? And so he said, well, I just moved here recently. I'd spent the previous 8 years at SpaceX. I was the lead engineer responsible for the life support systems that kept astronauts alive on the Dragon crew spacecraft.
Of
And
course.
it was right. I was like, of course you did. And I moved to Raleigh because I put a spreadsheet together as any engineer would, and I listed out all the cities and all my criteria. And me and my wife, we got here, checked most of the boxes, so we're here. And so I said, like instantly, I was like, all right, look, here's what we need to do. I'm going to shut my company. I think you should shut your company, and we should go build a materials company. Because what Wada was interested wasn't so much the hemp. What he was interested in was carbon removal. Could I grow, trees remove carbon, right?
Right.
Could we identify something that grew much faster than trees, pull carbon from the atmosphere faster, some material, some biomass, and if we could do that, where would we put it, right? Could we turn it into something useful? And so then we said, well, where do trees go when you cut them down? Well, they mostly go into homes for home building materials, right? Some are just straight up 2x4s but some are engineered in a factory like plywood. And so we said, all right, well, let's think about some materials that like what we could go make. And so we started talking to home, but this was like 2 weeks. Like I'd met Wada, like this was in 2 weeks. We met for the first time. We start calling home builders. We're like, hey, we're going to grow maybe hemp, maybe something. And we've got these guys coming from SpaceX. We're going to build a factory. It's going to do something eco-friendly, some material. What do you want? And they were like, well, the most common material in homes today that are engineered is something called oriented strand board, OSB, which has replaced plywood. It's like a chipped board. I mean, you see it everywhere. If you saw it, you'd recognize it, but it's so common and so ugly that no one pays any attention to it. But it goes into almost every wall,
Right.
every roof,
But
every
then you
subdivision.
drywall or whatever, and then you
Exactly.
paint over it. So you
And
don't
then it's
know.
just, you don't see it. It's just in the wall, right? And so we said, okay, great. What's wrong with it? And they said, well, if it gets wet, that's a problem because it's not very
Oh,
moisture resistant. So we
sure.
said, okay, great. We'll make a better OSB from hemp or something. Would you want it? And so all these like green builders we're talking to were like, of course, that sounds great. So we got to work, and that's actually basically what we did. We went down a lot of R&D with hemp. And then we felt that hemp had a lot of good things going for it, but it was never going to be cost effective enough for us to sell into this, commodity market where price matters so much, right? And so we tested, talking to anyone we could possibly, any scientist, any lab, any government, you name it. Through the North Carolina Department of Agriculture, we eventually found this grass, tall grass, kind of looks like bamboo. It's not bamboo, that had been tested to replace corn in biofuels
Cool.
for like an ethanol.
Wow.
because it grew so much faster. So they were like, oh, maybe this could be. But that project never got off the ground. And so someone at the North Carolina Department of Ag, this guy Sam Brake, who I happened to got a chance to talk to, was like, tell me all this. He's like, look, we had a lot of it. I told him take it all out because now it's like project's over. I was like, oh man, like what are we gonna do? He's like, but I said to the boys, just leave half an acre. Maybe someday someone will call. And I was like, Sam,
Nice.
I'm that someone. This
That's
is that
it.
call. And so we tested this grass. It grows, probably 8 to 9 times, maybe 10 times faster than trees for the same amount of biomass on the same amount of land.
Right.
I mean, it's just you could harvest it more than once a year. And so we found this source of biomass that is pulling carbon from the atmosphere. And then we built a factory that's never been built before that's all electric, no smokestack. And the very simple concept is capture a lot of carbon in the field, turn it into something in the factory, but no smokestack, so you don't give it back. You don't give the carbon back. And therefore, you can sequester all that carbon in the materials in homes where, we live, work, and play. And so that's what Planted does.
That's amazing. And it's so exciting that you meet the right person and everything just like speeds up. You're like, what about this? And what about this? And how about if this happened? And things just fall into place. It's really cool. Like it was meant to happen like that.
It was crazy. Yeah, it did feel it Planted has always had this like sense of inevitability to me that this was going to work. We had to go out, we had to raise money. We didn't really know exactly what we were doing because we didn't really know exactly what we were selling to investors and trying to figure that out. It's always hard to raise money. It took a long time. But in the back of my head, I was always confident that we would do it, even at every step. And it's and then the thing is like what's so interesting about that when you're working with guys from SpaceX, people think, okay, rocket ships, these big brains, these guys who are like
Right.
geniuses. And I do think they are geniuses. Like the two guys, the co-founders I started this with, Nate and Wada, I do believe they are geniuses, and we've brought other really talented people from SpaceX as well. But people would come, one of their genius is they are also incredibly cheap. And by that, I mean like they're trained, don't over engineer anything. This is the SpaceX way, right? Like we're not trying to build the Mercedes of rockets. Like we're trying to build like the Kia of rockets. It just needs to work. Like
Wow.
don't and so we went and got the honestly the crappiest, cheapest, slightly dangerous uh, um, prototype space we could find in Durham, North Carolina, like really out of the way, dirt cheap. And then like imagine so you're making building material. We're making prototypes of little tiny things, 6 inches by 6 inches, just testing different materials. So you got to get some material, you got to slice it up, and
Mhm.
then you got to have a little bit of resin, a little bit of glue that you're going to put on it, and you got to mix it up. And so if you go buy a mixer, even a small mixer to do that, it's probably about $3,000 to $4,000. Well, when I got to the prototype shop for the first time and Wada was there setting up, I saw a 50-gallon pickle barrel bolted to a used treadmill that he had bought off Craigslist. And he was like, yeah, no, you just run it on this thing, for 5 or 10 minutes. It cost me like $180 to put the whole thing together. And like when investors came and saw that, they were like, here's my money. Because what they felt was one, these guys are brilliant, and two, they are going to be very good stewards of my investment. And
Right.
so it was very exciting. Yeah, it was really very exciting to get it off the ground.
That is so awesome. What a cool story, Josh. And so, I mean, I would say you were saying, it just seemed like it was going to happen. And it just seemed, in my mind, as you were talking, I was like, it has to happen because we can't keep doing, building things with the same products that we've been doing it because we're killing everything. We're taking all the trees and everything. And so thank goodness for you guys. Like, thank goodness for this project and this business and being an example of what's possible.
Thank you.
It just like someone has to do it. And I'm just glad that you guys were there. And just, and joining forces just makes it more exciting. And it just sounds like it. You were saying after 2 weeks, you were like, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna quit our businesses, and we're gonna do this, and we're gonna start over, and blah, blah, blah. Like 2 weeks.
It was, and it was Yeah, it just did have a little bit of fate about it. I mean, so I was living in Asheville, North Carolina at the time, and Wada came up to Asheville. We hadn't met. We were already talking, I think, on the phone together, talking to builders, and we hadn't incorporated the company. It took probably at least 2 more months before really felt like, okay, we have a business here. I mean, just doing a lot of research. But it was just, so Wada's meeting me, and I'm convinced this is happening. I'm just convinced this is happening. And so, yeah, so I do think that, they often say for entrepreneurs that you have to create your own kind of bubble of self-delusion, right, that you operate in to like go forth into the world
Yeah.
with something that doesn't
You have to
exist.
ignore the negativity in order to just push forward and make, do your thing for sure.
Right. So we were definitely in our own bubble of self-delusion, just kind of marching along, feeling like this is happening. Um, and yeah, that was helpful. The way we got our first investor was pretty awesome as well. I was posting a lot on LinkedIn. We had these like cool videos of little slabs of our hemp panel and what the industry uses, and then we did the sledgehammer test, and we showed that like it bounced off ours but broke through the OSB. Really
Right.
like grainy, but we put it on LinkedIn. It went viral, and this woman who had been on my radio show years earlier on The Lazy Environmentalist called me up, and she called me up. She emailed me. She said, "Hey, I just saw your video." She said, I think my boss might be interested in this. Are you looking for investors?" And I was like, "Oh, God, yes, are we looking for investors?" And so she said, "Well, my boss is Biz Stone." She's like, "I don't know if you've heard of him, but he co-founded Twitter and he's on the board of Impossible Foods." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I know who Biz is."
I've heard
And
of
so
them.
anyway, so we got to chat with Biz. He saw, well, he saw the civilizational change possibilities of a product like this and got excited. So that's how we got our first
Awesome.
investor.
That is
Yeah.
awesome. And shout out to LinkedIn.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that's really cool that you just, I mean, obviously you were posting for that, but someone just like, you didn't have to approach anyone. Like she just,
Well, she was, yeah, he was like the 100th investor. We'd already approached 99.
oh, okay.
Got in a whole bunch of no's,
Yeah,
before we got,
right.
yeah,
But then, she
yes.
was just like, are you looking for investors? Well, sure
Yeah.
we are, of course.
Yeah.
That's
Try and play it casual, try and play it cool. We're like, yeah, maybe, who, so yeah, he's a great guy. It was, very fortunate.
that is very cool. And so the Lazy Environmentalist was a radio show.
Well, it was a radio show, and then it was a radio show I'd started in my closet in Brooklyn. I soundproofed my closet, went into it, and then I got a lucky break and got to Sirius XM. I was in New York City, so I went to Sirius, and then it became a reality TV show that I had for 2 years.
What?
Yeah, and I made the TV show. So Sundance Channel, Robert Redford's channel, called me up, brought me in. I'd been doing a lot of spokesperson work. I was working with Brita, the pitcher company, on a campaign. The way that actually all started was I had this radio show on Sirius XM, and it went live daily. It was 2007. Al Gore's movie An Inconvenient Truth had come out in 2006, and it was this moment when the media wanted to now tell this story of green, something, but they didn't know what to do, and that so then they started looking at it through the consumer lens. They said, okay, well maybe like we can talk about what consumers can do or consumer products. And at the time, I had this eco-friendly furniture home furnishings company, and I had this radio show where I was talking to everyone who was making all the stuff. And so a producer from Martha Stewart reached out in early 2007 and said, hey, do you want to come on the show for Earth Day? You can talk about turning off the tap and when you brush your teeth. And I said, well, I tell you what, why don't I send over some ideas and you see what you think? So I sent over like this solar powered, lawnmower that like, the robo mower for outside, and just, diapers that were flushable and biodegradable, and what like just whatever crazy stuff I knew of. And so she was like, yeah, we're going to do it. And she's like, but you've never been on national TV before, so you can't mess up. And I was like, oh, well, that really calms me down.
Okay.
Yeah, so I did. So I went on the Martha Stewart show in 2007 for Earth Day, it was amazing, and that opened up a lot of opportunities, which eventually got to this radio TV show on Sundance Channel where they called me up and they were like, "Hey, we want you to go make this show. Why don't you fly out to LA? Why don't you go have lunch with this guy, Dave Metzler, who created Queer Eye for the Straight Guy? We think you guys can do some great things together. Go do it." And so I did. I went out to Los Angeles. We shot the pilot. They green lighted it, and then we made 2 seasons of this reality TV show, this like
That is
dream
so
makeover show.
cool. Is it still available?
You can find it you can find it through like Apple TV and a couple other places still. I recently downloaded the episodes, convinced my kids that I actually did have a TV show. Yeah, they don't really, I don't think they were really believing me. But yeah, it was wild. It was really wild. One of the best parts about it was I got to have lunch with Robert Redford, and we were shooting some segments, some ads at the Sundance Film Festival. I think this was 2009. And the woman who ran Sundance Channel at the time was flying in a couple days early. Some friends of mine from college were there, and they were like, "Dorfman, you better get us into parties. Like you like
Of course. Yeah.
you're not really a celebrity, but like you should have at least some pull. You've been useless all your life, Dorfman. Like hook us up." So anyway, so I came in a
So
couple
funny. As
days
you're
early.
saying this, I'm like, what a life you're living.
This was this was a peak time in my life. So I flew to Park City. I landed. I got a call from this woman, Laura, who ran Sundance Channel at the time. She was like, "Hey, Josh, I know we're not supposed to see you until Monday, but Bob really would love to have lunch with you tomorrow. So if you could just be up at the lodge, we'll go down to his place." And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this."
Really
So
happening?
I go meet Laura. We get in this little van. There's like 3 or 4 of us driving down to Robert Redford's. He has the Sundance Resort about 45 minutes away. And I'm talking to Laura in the van. I'm like, "Laura, what do I call him? Do I call him Mr. Redford? Do I call him Rush?" She's like, "You call him Bob, Josh." I'm like, "Nope, that
I don't think I can do that.
there's just no way, no way." She's like, "All right, whatever, weirdo. We all call him Bob. So like, you
He's
just
gonna know you don't fit.
you're just gonna have to work. You're gonna have to work it out. You have to work it out. So we get down to his resort, and he comes out, and it's during the film festival, so he's got all these cameras
Oh
trailing
my
him and
gosh.
reporters. And he sees Laura, he gives her a big hug, and then he sees me, and he's like, "Josh," and he comes over, shakes me. He's like, "Walk with me." So someone actually got this picture of me walking with Robert Redford, and we go have lunch. The whole time I can't say his name, but at the end of lunch, finally I'm like, Bob, and
Sir?
he's like, "Yes." I'm like, can I get a picture? Because my mom would really love it if we could get a picture. So he was very gracious. He's like, "Of course, snap a picture, send it to my mom, call her 10 minutes later. She's screaming forever." She's like, it was very exciting.
That is so awesome.
It was very cool.
Wow. That and so all right, so you were talking to people that were making things initially, way back before you got to be famous and talking to Bob Redford and whatever. Um, but so the lazy environmentalist was talking to other people who were in the sustainability field, basically. Um, so that's very cool. And now you're doing SuperCool, which is a podcast in along the same lines ish.
Yeah, the through line from lazy environmentalists through some of these ventures to super cool is still this idea of what is happening today that is cutting carbon and doing it in a way that enhances quality of life, right? If it's a business, also drives profits or lowers costs. But my view is we shouldn't be solving climate change. Well, I think it's a low bar to say, let's go solve climate change so we don't die. And I don't really think that's very inspiring. I think it's much more enticing to say there are all of these solutions underway at a citywide scale, at an industry-wide scale, that cut carbon, but also make our lives better and point us toward a future that we could actually get excited about.
Hmm.
And so, super cool, different than lazy environmental. Super cool is more of a business conversation. We'll bring on companies that are doing just some fascinating things. Some of it is really techy, and we try to break that down, like this company Rondo, right? That has a battery that's made of bricks. It's different. It's hard for people. So it was hard for me to get my mind around the
Right.
concept, but it really like battery in the sense of we have to store energy, right? So how do we store energy? And their concept was, well, when you look at the factories of the world, whether they're making cement or steel or baby food or paper, anything in between, everything needs a lot of heat, uses a lot of heat. And that heat doesn't come from the grid, it comes from natural gas boilers. It comes from a lot of fossil fuels, sometimes coal, depending on where for a furnace.
Right.
So it's very difficult to decarbonize that heat. And so Rondo came up with, again, it's called like a heat battery, and they figured out a way to be able to capture solar and wind energy during the day, mostly, or when it's running, um, and capture that energy because when it's running during the day, if there's more solar and wind running than the grid can actually use, the price of that solar and wind actually goes negative. It's actually a problem. So they can get that energy, store it, and then store it in bricks, right? Very like ubiquitous, low cost materials,
Right.
and have these bricks like on factory sites and plug directly into the boilers or whatever else that a factory is using. And so instead of relying on natural gas, you can actually pull the heat. These bricks can get very, very hot and start to pull your heat as steam from the bricks. So low cost, good for factories, good for the environment. It actually can help do some useful things for the grid. So we'll talk about things that get sort of wonky like that. That's a really interesting company. But we'll also like one of my favorite episodes was we interviewed this guy, Kyle Wagenschutz. And I read about him because he had been involved in a pilot to see if they could do something that's very hard to do in America, and that's get good, protected, safe bike lanes built in cities in months instead of decades, right? Because even in most cities in America, like if the mayor's on board, we're doing bike lanes,
Right.
and the budget's passed, and the city council approved, and the thing's going forward, invariably it grinds to a halt. And so it's just, it happens all over. We're so car centric, it happens for a whole bunch of reasons. So Kyle had cut his teeth doing this type of work in Memphis, Tennessee. He was a bicycle advocate in Memphis. He had just gotten a graduate degree. They had a new mayor come in. I want to say this was probably somewhere around, I think, 2010, 2011. And for 2 years in a row, Memphis had been voted or named by Bicycle Magazine as the worst place to bike in America. So the mayor comes in and he says, Kyle, you have one job, get us off the list. And he went to work. He figured a lot out in Memphis, like a very unfriendly biking place at the time. And he made a lot of change. And so about 8 or 9 years later, he starts working on a project. Again, can we speed this up? And they did it in New Orleans, in Providence, Rhode Island, in Pittsburgh, in Denver, and Austin. So geographically diverse, different kinds of cities, right? Some in the south, some in the north, some in left leaning, some in right leaning. It worked, and so we got him to say, "How'd you do it? I want to know what's your innovation?"
For
Because
sure.
there's right, and he said, "Well, we did a lot of things, right?" So and he went through the whole playbook. But one of the things that jumped out at me, he said, "Look, like if you want to get," he's like, your main job when everybody wants this, but it doesn't happen, is you have to clear the runway in City Hall for it to happen, and that means you have to clear out the people who clog up the runway. So you don't need to spend your time talking to people who bike to get more bike lanes. They already want them. You
Right.
have to go to the people who don't want them, who are never going to use them, and you have to get them on board. You have to go to car drivers. And if you can figure out how to get car drivers supportive, then it happens. I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. How do you do that? And he was like, well, we tried a lot, but the thing that worked the most was appeals to nostalgia, appeals to an earlier time, appeals to a time when neighborhoods were slower, when roads were shared, when people were outside more, felt more comfortable, knew their neighbors,
Right.
right? There's a higher quality of life. And he's like, and that actually messaged in effective ways was very effective at getting more people to get on
Wow.
board. And they got it done. So that's super cool to me because that changes everybody's lives in the city. So sometimes it's a business, sometimes it's a policy, sometimes it's a different kind of innovation, but that's what we're really looking at SuperCool.
I love that. And then the first episode that I listened to was, because I just learned about you recently, was the guy that did the reusable stuff at concerts.
Oh my God,
Like,
yeah. So
awesome.
Mike Martin,
Red
yeah.
Rocks, come on.
I know that guy was awesome. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So that yeah, Mike Martin is coming to our world. What I loved about that was, so Mike, his moment, his environmental epiphany was the Exxon Valdez oil spill in the 1990s. And he was an investment banker at the time, I believe. And he was just like, what am I doing? Like, how can this be the world? Like, how do we just allow this to happen? And he's tried to figure out how to get involved in change. And his path took him to starting to work on green concerts. And he did the first, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but climate concert on the mall in Washington, D.C. And the best thing that, like, to me, I thought the best job he has, the best title, because it's my favorite band of all time. He's basically like the chief sustainability officer for U2,
Right.
right? Or they're headed, and I was just like, dude, like, I worship you. That's the coolest thing I can think of. But
Sure.
with our world, what he realized was like he'd been trying to green all these concerts. And so you think, well, should we use compostable cups? Should we use cups that, that are recyclable? And he just felt that's all a wash. It's all a waste because of invariably like it doesn't get recycled. If you have a compostable and it goes into the recycling bin, it ruins all of the
Okay.
recycling, right? And he realized like it's a little bit counterintuitive, but reuse was going to be the best thing. And so he's built this model, yeah, to do this in concert venues, not just concert venues, but in stadiums for, I think Cal Berkeley is the first stadium now that has this reusable cup all the time,
Super
right?
cool.
Um, the where the Lakers play, the crypto, whatever the crypto arena in Los Angeles. You see concerts, you go to sports, you're using this cup. And I thought was what was really interesting about our world too was that his design challenge was to design a cup that was, functional enough and like attractive enough that you would drink out of it, but ugly enough that no one wants to take it home. And I was like, wow, it'd be really interesting to get that design brief. Be like, what are we gonna make?
Yeah.
Um,
Who
right?
comes up with that?
But it was really about the infrastructure. How do you build nationwide infrastructure to support reusable, in this case, cups or serveware, right? And if you can really think about the infrastructure of it, right, the wash centers, the logistics, get the cups there, then you can actually make a dent in the universe, so to speak. And so that too, it's like we could talk about reuse in our own lives. That is important. What really excites me is saying, how do you do reuse at every arena across America? And then it's just the default. No one
Right.
even has to think about it, right?
Yep.
That's in my mind. That's
And if they can do it in a stadium, they can do it in a restaurant. You
right,
know?
right, exactly. And so I find that very inspiring. I find someone like Mike who's dedicated his career to doing that. It's wonderful to be able to tell his story. And what we're trying to do on Super Cool is understand, okay, what's Mike's superpower? What made our world work? What can we distill out of that so that whether you're in that industry or not, if you're just listening to the show, there's lessons to learn that you say, oh, maybe I could apply that to, my business or my line of work. Or it's really interesting how Mike, convinces people in his messaging, something that he says, right? We're always trying to figure out what is the universal truth in this thing or that others could that gives people agency in their own lives to go affect change. That's what excites me as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just this seed, but their passion in it, and then the way that they put it out there, it just like lights up, which is so awesome. Um, Gosh, this is super fun. I'm really enjoying this. Um, so I I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan, obviously. I need to understand it better, and I'll just need to put more time into research. But I'm loving it so far, and I'm so impressed with the that you've been doing it for a while, and it's not something that, I feel like it's something that we're passionate about it enough that you're not gonna like it's not gonna get old. Like you're just learning new things, and you're taking it to new places. And I just love that. It's not, you did the radio show, you did reality show. And then the planted business, and now you're like talking to other businesses, which is also just very cool. And I love that you're it's like getting the snowball rolling. You know, you talk to these businesses and people get excited because it's already like underway. Like, you know, you were saying it's not like everyone needs to do a little something, but it's something that people can get behind because it's already working. And then to see that progress gets people kind of lit up. And I think that's also really important. I mean, I do like to let people know everyone can do something and it's all, you know, part of it. But there's also, you know, those people that have, you know, the business sense and they can put it into practice and really like make real dents and make a real impression on things. And so I love that you're highlighting those people and introducing people to them because I can't wait to tell everyone.
Oh, thank
You know,
you.
I've told a few people about the about Mike and our world already because I was just like, you know, I love concerts. I can't afford to go to concerts a lot, and I don't do the night thing very well, but I do love to go to concerts, and I just can't. The waste has been always really hard. So that's a really exciting thing for my world, but also, I mean, just I can't wait to learn more and see what else you got going on there.
Thank you.
But so, I mean, like I said, you've been doing this for a while, Josh, and you have so much to look back on. But like, if you were, when I say the word sustainability, what does that mean to you? Like, I mean, it's such a big word, but for you personally, what is that?
Sustainability means to me to live as well as you possibly can while enabling future generations to do the same.
That sounds like you've thought about it before.
I
I love
have thought about that before.
it. That's very thought out, and it's really good. I mean, it's just what it is. But so if people are as loving this conversation as much as I am, and they're like, I need more of Josh. I need to hear, I want to look that show up and I and and I, you know, I want to listen to the podcast and I want to, you know, learn about Planted and stuff like that. How can people find you?
The So the website for SuperCool is getsuper.cool. And it is a podcast. We also do a weekly newsletter. They're not exactly the same. We in some respects we go a little bit deeper in the newsletter than the conversation in the podcast. So folks can kind of get more, or we'll just kind of be a little more expansive on a topic. So if it's Mike and it's reuse and it's our world, we'll cover, well, what else is happening in the circular economy? That's kind of the point of the newsletter. So all of that's available at getsuper.cool. As you mentioned, Amy, I am most active on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
That's we are active on Instagram as well, but LinkedIn tends to be where we're posting the most, kind of interacting the most. And if anyone's listening who wants to engage with me or SuperCool there, that would be fantastic.
Awesome. Very cool. Um, Josh Dorfman, thank you so much for sharing your world with us. I'm so, gosh, it's just, it's so much bigger than I thought. And I love the stories. You've got so many stories from all the cool things that you've done. But thank you so much for coming and sharing those today.
Well, thank you for giving me all of those wonderful opportunities to talk about it and reminisce and yeah, and kind of get into what we're doing today. I appreciate it.
I just want to take a second to thank my guest again for speaking with me and sharing such great information. I love having these conversations with folks. I also want to thank Buzzsprout for hosting the podcast, for Jane Bolduck and her music genius, for Becca Coffron and her award-winning artwork. And thank you for listening. I appreciate that so much. Please check out the show notes for any links and extra information. And if you would like to follow my guest and find out more about them, I'm sure they would love the follow. And if you don't mind leaving a rating or review wherever you're listening, and just help to get this podcast in front of new eyes, that would be amazing. I would really love that. And feel free to reach out to me on the socials and let me know what you're thinking. And if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, please let me know that. I would love to have a conversation with you about sustainability. All right. Thank you again. I hope you have a great rest of the week.
There'll come a day, my mama told me, when I find love to have and hold me, a heart that's strong and so sincere. Just tell me, how do I get there from here? Oh, tell me, how do I get there from here? 'Cause here and now I'm so far down that mercy's bound to find me. We'll find a way to soothe the sickness. We'll heal the hate with sweet forgiveness. Wages of war will disappear. Just tell me, how do I get there from here? I wonder, how do I get there from here? Yeah, 'cause here and now I'm so far down that mercy's bound to find me. When that state of grace has finally found me, well, there'll be music, ooh, and good friends around me, yeah. And I'll just smile through happy tears and wonder